Alright, so based on this 200-page investigation, it transpires that perhaps the leading German fighter ace, that only 20% of their victories could potentially be verified. But there might also be another top scorer. So let's talk about that. Welcome back to Military Aviation History. My name is Chris and I talk about all things air power every Thursday on this channel. And this video is also sponsored by you, the patrons, the channel members, and of course all of you supporters also that buy, well, books from our publishing house. A couple of examples here. Yours sincerely wrote this one. We also have other authors that are contributing to the publishing house growing inventory. So do check out the links in the description below if you want to support the channel. But jumping into the content here, I want to talk about kill verification, specifically with the Germans, and this investigation. Now, this book was highly recommended to me by Dr. Schwieder from the Royal Military Academy in Sandhurst. I interviewed him in the past. You may have seen the America Bomber video. In fact, this is his book, and I will have to return it presently because I've been holding on to it for a little bit too long. This book is fantastic, but more on that later. Let's start with a blank slate here. What is an ace? An ace is a pilot who shoots down 5 enemy aircraft. That's an ace. And when you look at World War II, we have the Germans who are topping the ranking there. We have 2 pilots who have shot down or are credited with shooting down more than 300 aircraft. Then we have around a dozen who were credited with shooting down more than 200, more than 100 who have shot down more than 100 enemy aircraft, and around 1,000, maybe even more than 1,000 who have shot down more than 5 aircraft, so who have become an ace. And this is all sort of topping the leaderboard, especially once you go beyond 66 kills, because the highest ranking Allied pilot, who was a Soviet pilot, I believe he was actually Ukrainian, he shot down 66 planes or enemy planes, or is credited with shooting down 66 enemy aircraft. As a simple measure of success, this is the way that, you know, in aerial warfare we have come to measure certain pilots' success. Now, the scope for this video is going to be on the Germans alone and limited to this book and limited to this Geschwader, and specifically the zweite Gruppe of Jagdgeschwader 52 in their time over Hungary towards the end of the war. And the reason for that is that an investigation like that is incredibly difficult. The authors, as you know, from you can read it in the book itself, and I highly recommend you to getting this book as well. You know, they look at different archives. They looked at Soviet archives, they looked at German archives, they looked at previous research that was done, they look at archaeological evidence and so on. So their methodology is quite stringent and time intensive. So focusing it just on one group and specific pilots in that group makes sense. And like I said, 200 pages only based on 8 pilots gives you an idea of what sort of volume of work this was. Now, because we want to focus on the Germans, let's step back just quickly and talk about kill verification. Now, the Germans did have specific rules in play of how a kill was verified. First thing first, the pilot had to file a claim. A document like this. It just basically says where they were, what time it was, what they shot down, if there are any witnesses, and so on and so forth. These forms change throughout the war. They even differ between Geschwader sometimes, but this is basically what they would have to file in. And then based on the rules, which were initially quite stringent, you needed to have witnesses, there needed to be a wreck, there needed to be, you know, a very long-winded verification procedure where some pilots were waiting for weeks, even months to have something verified. Now, by the end of the war, and I would say by sort of summer 1943 and definitely in 44, things start to unravel a little bit, and you know, the process gets a lot quicker. There is a need, and also like there's a motivational need to get pilots their kills quickly, because that builds up their confidence and their trust in their own abilities. And we've actually, there are sort of mentions from ex-German fighter pilots who said that, you know, they always try to have the first kill very quickly, because the pilots who had a first kill very quickly usually would be, you know, doing much better throughout their career until most of them got shot down. However, as the system also starts to unravel then, one of the interesting aspects that I actually learned in this book is that previous accomplishments were also taken into account when you file a claim. So if you are known to have shot down a lot of enemy pilots, or actually, let me rephrase that, if you had been credited or formally with shooting down a lot of enemy pilots, then when you hand in another claim, it was likely that you would get that claim verified a lot quicker and potentially with less evidence supporting it than previously. So the rich got rich faster, almost like snowballing. The more kills you get, the faster you get stuff verified, which is one of those things then, of course, as we move on throughout the war, and we'll also look at the element of propaganda, the role that fighter aces played in Germany of trying to beef up sort of the population's confidence in the war and the support of the regime, and look at these pilots who are shooting down hundreds of enemy aircraft, and the prestige that these pilots got, the medals that they got. We're starting to approach into this sort of territory where you can very quickly take a cynical view and say, well, you know, there must have been pilots who've just, you know, handed in one of these documents with not a lot of supporting evidence. And we also know of cases. So, for example, if you've ever read the book A Higher Call, there's a section in the book that describes how 2 pilots in Africa were found out to just shoot ammunition into the sand and then fly back to the base and claim kills in an area where there was no enemy activity. And they were found out of having done this, which, again, this is one of those things where there's evidence that this did happen, but at the same time, the book also describes how they were then started to be sanctioned and shunned by their own comrades. So there is a sort of a mechanism in place as well where this was not accepted behavior if you were found out. But what I would generally say about, if you look at the German leaderboard and all this discussion of why are the Germans all the way on the top and so few Allied pilots, well, you know, there's contextual reasons why German pilots are that high up the leaderboard. I don't want to go through all of them. There's actually a good video here by my buddy Gerhard from Military History Visualize. But you know, one of the easiest way of answering this question is, well, German pilots didn't rotate back. You know, American pilots, for example, were rotated after, you know, their tour. German pilots were stuck in their cockpit from the start to the end of their service, or until they were shot down. They had basically no holidays. So that's one of the reasons. There's other reasons, like, for example, aircraft performance early on in the war, and then contextually how it was for a long time in the war, facing different Allied fighter aircraft and so on and so forth. But watch the other video for that. What I will say, however, if you look at these claims and you look at the German pilots and you'll say, well, these must have been inflated, then the historian in me will just say, yes, overclaiming is a thing. Overclaiming is a German thing, it's a Soviet thing, it's an Italian thing, it's a French thing, it's a UK thing, it's, you know, Australian thing, it's a Canadian thing, it's an American thing. It's human. From experience, you know, reading books about air warfare in the Pacific, in the Mediterranean, in Europe, I generally, when I see claims, I halve them. You know, 10 aircraft were shot down that day, probably closer to 5. Rule by thumb, halve them. You get closer to the truth that way. But because it's nowadays so hard to verify all these things, when these verification studies were conducted, cross-examination of different archives, different countries' archives, and so on and so forth, we very quickly find across the war that never mind what nation you flew for, there's going to be overclaiming. Let's now jump into this book, which, as I said, the methodology for our time of what can potentially be done to verify these kills is very rigid. It's a very dedicated study. So we're going to look at 8 pilots of Zweite Gruppe Jagdgeschwader 52, which at the time actually had 21 aircraft, but 8 pilots for now, that suffices. As I said, 200 pages. Now, let's put all of this in a graph here first. We have the total awarded claims over the war. Then we have the claims in Hungary over the period of time covered by the book. Then we have the verified victories or the potential victories that were verified by the authors. Now, I will stack them here based on the verified percentage going from low to high. We're starting out with Haas. And then, in fact, we do have the official top scorer, Hartmann. Then Düttmann, Ewald, Sturm, and then the official number 2, Barkhorn, with an almost 80% verification. And finally Butz and Lipford, and that evens us out on an overall average of 54% of verified victories based on modern investigations. And this goes back to what I've said earlier, rule by thumb, always halve them. Always halve them. Now, looking at this data, of course, 80 years passed, it's easy now to point fingers and say, look at that. First of all, I'm not interested in that. I look at this from a sort of a data perspective. And I would say that what we're seeing here is basically, well, what I expect is basically a very human split. I will say that I am surprised, even though, you know, the overall average is basically what I assumed. I will say that I'm surprised by the width of the spectrum that the pilots have shown here. I expected to have the extreme ends closer to sort of 30 to 70% of verification. A little bit more verification on the low end, but a little bit less on the high end. That's where I would have put things. But it actually looks like, you know, that with 20 to sort of 90%, we have a very broad spectrum between the pilots. And then if we look at the top scorers, I mean, here, look at this. The official number 1, Hartmann, and the official number 2, Barkhorn. What is interesting here is that the report basically covers a comparable 9 to 10% of their total claims that they have. And so 9 to 10% of the claims they have put in for the time over Hungary is roughly equal percentage-wise to their total claims as well. Within that scope of the investigation, it looks like Barkhorn has a much higher claim accuracy than Hartmann, which is very interesting, I find that. Now, I don't think we should now jump immediately to the conclusion that Barkhorn is number 1 and Hartmann, you know, falls down the rankings to wherever you want to put him. But until we have another similar investigation, this data, I would say, speaks more highly of Barkhorn than of Hartmann, based, of course, within the confines of the data set that we have available. But beyond that, what I found really interesting as well are Lipfert and Ewald. Lipfert has a 92% overlap between his claims, so the Abschussmeldungen that he filed, and the investigation, for a data pool that is 25% of his awarded claims. So this is quite significant. This is, you know, 25% of your claims have been verified to 92%. That is significant, I would say. And it's also very significant, although it's in a negative sense, for Düttmann. All right? Then on the flip side, we also have Ewald. More than 60% of his total claims are over Hungary for his service during World War II, but only about 50% of them could be verified. So Ewald, based on the data pool we have here, maybe put in a couple of claims that either couldn't be verified by the researchers or have been put in with less supporting evidence or have been hastily put in. You know, maybe he shot at a couple of enemy aircraft, assumed they were going down, but they didn't. And here's the thing. I think this is where most of the overclaiming comes into. Again, based on this data, we see such a broad spectrum. I think the main thing that happens here is not people filing reports or claims in bad faith. They probably, for the most part, got into aerial combat, shot at enemy aircraft, and assumed that they had gone down. Maybe they saw the aircraft sort of banking away, trailing smoke or vapor, and then in the confusion of the dogfight, they couldn't really verify that it crashed into the ground. They had to go to the next target. They had to, you know, check their SIGs and so on and so forth. I recently sat inside a 109, by the way, and JG52 was still flying at 109s at this point. Well, there were some 190s there as well, but the 109s, and, you know, trying to sort of scan your SIGs and looking down and so on and so forth in a confusing dogfight. I can see how that is rather difficult. And also, let's not forget, these people are in an aircraft in an adrenaline-inducing, confusing dogfight. There's people screaming on the radios. They're constantly having to scan their own SIGs. You know, they go towards an enemy aircraft. They fire up a couple of shots, and maybe they see some, you know, impact rounds, or they see, like I said, some smoke coming out, and they just think, and then your mind starts to play games on you. Some pilots were just better at verifying their kills than others. Maybe they paid a little bit more attention. Maybe they put more emphasis on verifying that the plane actually goes down rather than their own preservation, right? It's, you know, some pilots may be scanning their SIGs. Other pilots may be looking, does this crash? Does this crash? Yes, it crashed. Okay, I can file this. Or maybe some pilots, the way they attacked aircraft allowed them, contextually speaking, to verify these kills more easily. So there you go. This is only a snapshot of the book. Get it? I think this is highly interesting for anybody who is interested in World War II aviation. This is a very human, I think, a very human approach to the subject, very grown-up, nuanced, data-heavy approach as well, that takes into account the difficulties of the subject, and that in the end we are all of us human after all. So I hope that you enjoyed that. Please put down your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of this examination, of this video, of this subject? Are there any sort of other anecdotes that you can remember from reading, a couple of books where overclaiming happened or didn't happen, or some people were found out to have cheated on their claims? Maybe, maybe they were German, maybe they were, I don't know, part of the Allies. Let me know in the comments below. A big thank you here to the patrons and channel members for their ongoing support. And as always, have a great day and see you in the sky. Oh, and Dr. Schmieder, I will send it back now. Thank you.